Andrew McCart, iFLTV, delighted, as always, to be joined by my, I'm going to say good friend now, because we've done loads of these, Dan. I consider you a friend now, a good
Absolutely.
friend. Dan Rafael, first and foremost, friend, how are you?
Tired. I'm tired, man. It's been
Likewise.
a fun but exhausting last week or so with the travel and the fight and all the stuff I was dealing with and doing and working on. So, but that's a good thing. It's not. I'm not complaining. It's first world problems.
Exactly. And that's why we love the sport, because it keeps us busy, it keeps us tired, and we can't moan because we're doing something we love. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about the fight itself. Let's just jump straight in at the deep end. I was in Belfast. I got Netflix on my phone. I was in the airport, 6 a.m., ready to get my flight home from Belfast, watching it on my phone. You were there live. What was it like, the atmosphere, the build up, the whole fight week out in Vegas? Before we talk about the fight itself, what was that whole build up like?
Well, the buildup was good. I mean, it was a little different because, and not in a bad way, but I'm so used to, as others who cover fights in Vegas a lot over the last number of years, the center of activity has now become either the MGM Grand and their arena or at the T-Mobile Arena. So
Mhm.
this was a change of pace because it's the first fight that I've gone to Vegas, and how I can tell you how many years it's been, other than either MGM or Mandalay Bay, that's been the host, and then the fight's either in one of those buildings or it's at the T-Mobile Arena, which is pretty much where most of the big fights are. And even in years past when they weren't there, you'd stay at the Wynn or at Caesars because the fight's going to be at the Thomas and Mack Center. But obviously, with this beautiful kind of newish giant football stadium where the Raiders play, if there was the right event to do a boxing event there, that they would look to that as a potential venue. So if you go back, however many years ago, was it like 2021 ish, 2020, when they were making the rematch between Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder? Ultimately, it happened at the T-Mobile Arena, but they were talking about potentially having that fight at the football stadium. It didn't happen. This time, when they did a fight the magnitude of Canelo and Crawford, they had the options to go to T-Mobile Arena. That's where Dana White, who was involved in this fight as the promoter from Zuffa Boxing, wanted to go to the T-Mobile Arena, but Turkey Al Sheikh liked the idea of doing it at the big stadium, and so Turkey won out, and they did it at the big stadium to the extent that they had to get the UNLV football team. They had to pay them to move their game because they already had a game scheduled on that date. So that game got pushed into back up into like the later part of August, and it vacated the stadium for the date, and they did the fight. And in the end, it seems like it worked out well. I don't know, what they gave away, what was free, this now. I can tell you what though, that place was packed. I
Mhm.
mean, they announced a crowd of over 70,000, and they were really that many people there. Now, what they ended up paying for, that's to be debated. I mean, they can pay the tax on the ticket and it counts as a buy. They deeply discounted tickets at the end, but in the end, they did announce the gate was like, I forget what it was, 44 million or 47 million. It's the third biggest gate in history,
Mm.
right behind two other mega Vegas fights, which was Mayweather against Pacquiao, number one, which was like 75 million, $72 million, and Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, which was around $55 million. And they put on a spectacular. I will give everybody the credit. Whoever was involved with how they dealt with in the stadium on the night of the fight, they did a spectacular job with the lighting and the music, and the production was just tremendous. It was a great atmosphere. The fans were super excited, and and the main event, it didn't deliver the fight of the year, right? But this was not one of these mega fights where there's so much hype that you leave disappointed because this was like a very meh fight. This was a good fight. This was not fight of the year, like I said, but this was a very worthwhile, exciting fight, and it kind of lived up to the buildup that there was for the months leading into the fight. So from that standpoint, it was a great event. It put boxing on a great stage, put in a first class great stadium, put on a tremendous event. You had two athletes that came and gave everything they had, and they put on a really entertaining and fun event. And you know, Netflix reported, in the United States, or no, I mean worldwide, I guess it was like what 41 million viewers for the main event or something like that. So it didn't reach necessarily the level of a Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fight, but I didn't expect it anyway because so many of those fans watching were not necessarily boxing fans, but it was sort of like they know Tyson, Jake Paul is this new
The crossover, yeah.
influencer, has a totally different kind of fan base. Um, but look, there was nothing wrong with how they did it. It was good, and I respect Canelo for doing the fight. Respect Crawford for jumping up two weight classes, really three weight classes, to take it on and making history the way he did. And but it was boxing, not to use the cliche, but it's true. It was boxing Super Bowl. Uh, you know, big turnout of fans and a top notch main event with two of the biggest names in the sport.
What did you make of the fight itself? Now, a lot of people saying that Canelo maybe should retire. I've heard that. I've heard that Canelo's on the slide. I don't know what to make of it all. When you look at the fight itself and you analyze it, I don't know if you've watched it back after being there live, but
I did.
what did you make of the fight itself? When you look at both fighters, what was your overall analysis of it all?
Well, the people that say Canelo should retire, I'm not really sure what the evidence is of that. So he lost to a supreme fighter in Crawford, who basically outboxed him to some degree, as well as took it to him when necessary, and perhaps surprised him a little bit by standing and fighting more than I think a lot of people expected. I think some people thought he might use his legs and box and move and pot shot him here and there. But to Terence Crawford's credit, he came in unbelievable condition, and when necessary, he sat down and traded with him right there in the middle of the ring. And as a matter of fact, if you watch during the fight, there were definitely moments where he was the man on the move. He was the aggressor. He was the one coming forward. He was the one stalking. And in the last two rounds of the fight, which is what sealed it up for him, 11 and 12, he was stalking him. He was taking it to Canelo Alvarez at times. He didn't run. He stood there in the pocket and used some decent movement and some good feints and this and that to sort of keep him off balance a little bit. But he didn't run. It's boxing in the pocket where you're able to move and avoid at least the full brunt of the punch. But Canelo Alvarez, even that Canelo Alvarez, that version of Canelo, would still beat most fighters in boxing. I mean, that's just my opinion. But I think that if you put him in with other top super middleweights or guys coming up from 160 and this and that, he's still going to be able to beat a lot of guys. He didn't beat Crawford, but Crawford is a special type of fighter. So I don't think Canelo needs to retire. But I've said this is not an insult to Canelo. It's just a reality of the human condition. You get to have the number of fights that he's had and the number of years he's been fighting and the punishment that's been involved in some of those fights that eventually you're going to start to slow down. So Canelo has been, in my mind, on like a slow but a decline nonetheless over the last few years. Now, some guys, you feel like they're at their prime one day and the next day they're done. I'll use Roy Jones as the example. I mean, he comes out of the fight with John Ruiz on top of the world. He's won a heavyweight title and he's untouchable still. Comes back against Antonio Tarver, struggles at light heavyweight when he dropped all that weight, still won. And you're like, okay, now the slide has started. Next fight he gets knocked out and he was never the same. Canelo's not been in that situation, but you can just tell it's been a slow degradation of his overall skills and all that. But he came in great shape. And by the way, he didn't get blown out. A lot of people are saying like it was a complete rout. I reject that. I've watched it live. I've watched it again when I came home. He lost the fight, but to me, the proper scoring of that fight would be either 8-4 for Crawford or 7-5 for Crawford. And if there was any doubt though about Crawford, he sewed it up because, like I said, not only on my card and lots of people that I was sitting around, but the ones that count, which was the official scorecards, he won 11 and 12 on all three cards. And was able to win the fight. So a lot of people had the fight even after 10, maybe had Crawford up by a round after 10. And, he left no doubt. And even Canelo, who's a proud guy, didn't complain. He gave him his credit. He didn't, mope about the scores and, the best man won. But it wasn't like, some people are making out like, like Crawford won 10 rounds to 2 or something like that. That's just not reality. They want to say that Canelo lost all the early rounds. Well, you can have a difference of opinion, but in my mind anyway, I thought Canelo was fairly dominant in, like, say, second round, for example. People are allowed to have different perspectives on the way that a round is scored. I mean, especially when they seem to be somewhat closer rounds. I mean, that's just a matter of perspective. And so, yeah, Crawford won the fight, but it was a really good performance from him, but it wasn't like he blew him out.
I'll give you some props, Dan, because you said to me in an interview, I think maybe a couple of months before the fight was made, and we were talking about it, the different variables in the fight, the weight, the age, the year off for Crawford. But you picked on something that you said, which sticks with me, because you did say that Canelo has had over 300 rounds or something close to that, more
No,
than
it was
Crawford.
the number was going into the bout. Canelo was at 520 rounds as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And going into the bout, Crawford, although older chronologically by 2 years, only at 245 rounds, half as many rounds approximately than Canelo. And in those rounds, Crawford had taken a lot less punishment compared to the punishment that Canelo has taken in the 520 rounds.
That's
so
right. Yeah.
The chronological age to me was completely irrelevant. It was about where are you as a professional, and Crawford was the fresher fighter. I picked Crawford to win the fight. I picked him to win the decision. I'm not surprised in any way how it went. The only thing that surprised me a little bit was that he actually stood and fought him head to head, chest to chest, toe to toe, however you want to describe it, for the amount of time in that match that he did. And he came in like I said, great condition. My big question, Andrew, was when the fight was made, how was he going to approach the weight? Is he going to go all the way up to 168 and try to muscle him and be on the same level in terms of the weight? Or is he going to maybe come in a little bit less than the 168 to at least try to retain some of the speed that would certainly be his advantage? He decided that he was going to go and bulk up as much as he could. I mean, roughly. They both came in at 167 and a half, so they were essentially on the 68-pound limit. And he looked good at that limit. He didn't look slow. His hands were still quick. He got off a lot of rapid-fire combinations. I think that kind of surprised Canelo that he hit as hard as he did. And if you listen to Crawford, you'd think that's something you're going to pay attention to is, okay, this man is not a lot of knockouts, and he's supposedly the much bigger guy. What's his power like? And he was asked about that in the post-fight press conference. And he said, Canelo hits hard, but I have to tell you, for me, he said that Mean Machine, Edges Kavalauskas, actually hit harder than Canelo. And that was the one guy that, although he got knocked out by Crawford, scored to what many believe was a knockdown against Crawford, the only one of his career, but the referee did not call that a knockdown. Nonetheless, certainly didn't seem like Crawford had any problem taking whatever punches that Canelo was able to land.
What next then? We've spoke about the slow decline of Canelo, like a double barrel question here. What next for Canelo? What next for Crawford? Crawford's a 3-time undisputed, up at 168. Is there anything left for him to do? And we've talked about the decline of Canelo. What's next for both fighters?
That's a really good question. I've been thinking about that ever since the fight, because normally when these big fights conclude, there's always something to think about as far as, okay, well, what's next? There's some other name out there, or some other division to conquer, or some other interesting thing that they could go in terms of the direction of their career. I feel like this one, though, kind of felt like the end of the line, right? Crawford now has done what he wanted to do, which is become the undisputed champion in a third weight division. He made it very crystal clear at the news conference he's not going back to 154, which is where he held a title. And then when the bell rang, the WBA stripped him. And so he's not going back to that weight class. He was asked about, would you fight Jaron Butzenis? No reason. He's not going back down. At 160, there's really no names. And at 168, he's now the undisputed champion. So if Crawford's going to fight again, and there's been speculation, he's admitted he'll think about it. Maybe he'll retire. He made it, his biggest paycheck for this fight. He obviously, if you're going to walk away on top, what better way to do that? You're undefeated. You just beaten a future Hall of Famer, a historical opponent. You've created, I could go through it. I asked Crawford at the press conference after the fight, literally like a laundry list of historical things he did. I've made the point that if Canelo had won the fight, from the historical perspective, it would be a great win, beating a Hall of Famer, somebody of the caliber of a Crawford, but it's basically just a defense. But when Crawford wins, he makes all kinds of history in terms of number of lineal titles, number of undisputed titles, the weight differences, lineal championships. I mean, you name it, the length of time that there's been since there's been undisputed in the 3 weight classes. You got to go back to the 1930s with Henry Armstrong in the one belt era. My point is, that's a great way to walk away. If he decides to fight again, maybe he goes to middleweight and tries to, if he's motivated for more history, he's going to get paid whoever he fights. Okay. Yeah. Whoever they select for him or who he selects. So maybe he wants to go to middleweight, where obviously he wouldn't have a lot of problem making the weight, and maybe pick up a title in a 6 weight class, which would put him in even more elite company. There's only been, in terms of men's boxing, there's only 2 fighters ever that have won titles in 6 weight classes. That's Oscar De La Hoya at 6 and Manny Pacquiao at 8. So he could do that. That might be something that would motivate him. Perhaps he goes after a title there. The other thing is, if he stays at 168, you got to figure the names that would be in the running would be the guys that were being talked about if Canelo had won. And so that was Hamza Shiraz, who was there. I had a chance to sit and talk to Hamza on Thursday night at the Turkey Al Sheikh show. That was a smaller card that was in the Fontainebleau Hotel. You've got the other names that were mentioned as possible for Canelo had he won were maybe the winner of the Chris Eubank Jr. Conor Benn rematch. That's maybe a possibility if he decides to stay at that weight class. Christian Mbili, who was the WBC's interim champion, he got a draw in a title defense on the undercard. Was a spectacular, absolutely action-packed fight. He's a name that's there. There are other fighters in that weight class that are highly ranked. So But at this point, Crawford is going to be able to kind of pick and choose who he wants to fight. I guess he deserves that. I'm sure he'll, if he decides he wants to keep fighting, he'll sit down with his team and he'll talk to Turkey about what the best course of action is. And in terms of Canelo, sort of the same thing. Dude, I guess they could still go forward and do a Shiraz fight, for example, if it was amenable to everybody, and put on a nice fight. It's not a world championship fight, but that's okay. It is kind of weird because it's the first time in like 10 years
Yeah.
that Canelo's not a world champion. But I'm pretty sure that Canelo will fight again. I'd be surprised if he retired. He still has 2 more fights on his deal with Turkey Al-Sheikh that they signed. That was part of this getting this Crawford fight. First, he did the skull fight in May, and then this fight, and now supposedly 2 more fights next year. But I really believe it's very open ended right now, Andrew. There's no obvious fight, and just to put a bow on it, I do not believe there's going to be a rematch.
That was my next question.
Yeah,
that was my next question.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of speculation there was a rematch clause. I was told very specifically by people in Canelo's camp that there wasn't a rematch clause. Yes, Turkey has options on the next 2 fights, so if he wanted to make a rematch, I suppose he could. But there's no like Canelo can't just like invoke a contractual option and say I want the rematch. At least at the moment, it seems like that would be a little bit of a surprise. And I don't know, it doesn't feel like the kind of fight that would warrant a rematch. Frankly, it was a good fight, like I said, but it wasn't. Can they do better in the next fight? Is it going to bring in more than 70,000? I mean, is Netflix going to want to put up another, big giant boatload of money to do the rematch, or would they rather do something fresh? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I guess there's an outside chance maybe there would be a rematch, but I just don't necessarily see there being the big demand for that. But time will tell.
What did you make of Canelo's comments of him saying that Crawford is better than Mayweather? Do you agree?
I was like, I don't know what his motivations were for that, and I'm not going to say that. I think maybe that's what he really believes. Canelo, I think, is pretty straightforward when he answers those types of questions from the media members. But I think it was just more because it's fresh in his mind, and it maybe makes the loss look better if you say that he's better than Mayweather, because when he fought Floyd, he was just a young kid that was not very experienced, and now he's like the veteran professional, future Hall of Famer, and so. If you say that the guy that beat you was better than the guy that beat you when you were a kid, it doesn't feel as bad of a loss, if that makes sense. So, look, obviously Crawford and Mayweather are very different fighters. They're both obviously Hall of Famers. Floyd's already in the Hall of Fame. Crawford has huge amounts of accomplishment too. Didn't get a chance to fight as many of the big names as Floyd did. But they're both great fighters. But I don't know if I could put Mayweather behind Crawford if I'm making my all-time pound for pound type list. So, and that's not a knock on Crawford. I just don't think he's as high as Floyd is.
Here's a question for you then. We talk about the pound for pound list and stuff like that, and then when Usyk beat Dubois, Usyk's up there. It's like a 24-hour news cycle, as you know, in this boxing game. Crawford now is a 3-time undisputed, 3-weight undisputed as well. So now he's elevated to #1 pound for pound. I knew he fought MJ, a young, hungry guy at super bantamweight. He's going to probably be a 3-weight undisputed champion as well if he goes up to featherweight. It's clearly those 3. Now, if I had to press you on that, Dan, where do you sit them?
Well, first things first, like you said, it's those 3. And anybody who's making it, first of all, let's be clear. I don't give a fuck what anybody's pound for pound list looks like. People get so hung up on who's your pound for pound. I don't care who yours is. I don't care who the other guys is. I know who I have. If you don't care about mine, I don't care that you don't care. It's all mental gymnastics.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me about my pound for pound list, which you are, to me, if you're making a pound for pound list and your top 3 guys are not, in a way, Usyk and Crawford, in whatever order you put them, then it's not credible. There's not another guy that you could conceivably make #1, 2, or 3 ahead of any of those people. There's lots of other top-notch fighters. You want to tell me in your top 5 or 6 or 7, you want to still include like a Bivol or a Better Biev or a Bam Rodriguez or even Canelo, whatever. Fine, but not in the top 3. Those are the top 3 guys. So now you got to decide what order. And because boxing is it doesn't stand still. We just saw. In the span of a few hours, you had Crawford defeating Canelo. And then a few hours after that, in the morning, United States time, you had Inoue doing a great job and convincingly defeating Akhmadaliev, an opponent that a lot of people thought maybe Inoue might show his age, might show some wear, and maybe have a hard time or perhaps would even lose. But he turned in a masterpiece, and he easily outboxed Akhmadaliev. So for me, I got to go with Crawford because of the audacious weight jump. and the way he did it, the game plan he employed, and the way he went about the victory. But if you told me that you disagree, I can't get too mad, because somebody might say, well, in a way, because he's now cleaned out yet another division, he's much more active. Crawford's fighting once a year, barely fighting, whereas in a way has already got 3 fights this year now. He's going to fight again in December, so he'll have a 4-fight year, which is highly unusual these days for the very top elite fighters. And Usyk, I mean, what can you say? The guy's knocking out and beating the top heavyweights, and he's done it in 2 weight divisions, cruiserweight and heavyweight. So there's no wrong answer. You know what I'm saying? For me right now, I guess I'd probably be inclined to say Crawford, but I could be swayed either way. I think all 3 of them, I say it like this: for those of us that are boxing fans, count yourself as very lucky right now, because you should realize and understand you're seeing 3 legit all-time greats doing their thing. And that's not the most common thing in the world. There's always great fighters around, but to see 3 at this level doing the types of things they're doing in terms of historical accomplishments, in terms of the magnitude of the fights and the interest around the world, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, all 3 of these guys are legit all-time greats.
I agree with you, Dan. I 100% agree with you. I argue the fact with somebody today that Usyk, even though Crawford done the audacious weight jump, he was still the same weight and height and maybe even taller than Canelo. Usyk has done it fighting guys 30 pounds heavier,
Sure.
3 inches taller. So I look at that and I think, well, can I sway more to Usyk still being number one? It's mental gymnastics, like you said. I mean,
I
you can argue
totally
about
get
it
it.
all day.
Yeah, there's no wrong answer. If you tell me you think Usyk's number 1, I'm not going to get mad. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if you tell me that it's, somebody that's not one of the 3 guys I mentioned, then I'm going to say you should probably seek some medical attention.
Listen, well, I'm going to ask you this question then. Turkey said to me, well, not said to me, but said on Twitter, not said to me, I read it on Twitter, that they say something along the lines of, do you think that Benavidez can make 168? Now, obviously, he's talking about Benavidez coming down to fight Crawford, but surely that's an audacious plan.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, David is fighting on a Riyadh season card in November
Yep.
against Anthony Yard. He was already kind of struggling to make 168 before he went up in weight. The reason he continued to try to fight at the 168-pound limit was in the hopes that he could squeeze out another fight and get Canelo. Obviously, that did not happen. And so, I guess you never say never. I mean, if Turkey, I guess, decided to pay him some kind of crazy amount of money, maybe he would consider it. But, I mean, look, it was one thing for him to fight Canelo, an older superstar who was not that big. I mean, people have to understand, like, they are legitimately about the same size of human beings. But David is a lot bigger than Terence Crawford, a lot younger than Canelo, a lot fresher than Canelo. And no matter how great you are, at some point, weight and size does make a difference. That might be that type of fight. But I would never put anything past Terence Crawford. I mean, in terms of what he could do. But I feel like honestly, I'm not saying I would be opposed to the fight if the sides wanted to make it. But if Crawford's going to fight again, I'd be a little bit more interested actually to see him go down and try to fight one of the guys with a title at middleweight, just for the sake of the history.
Yeah, I agree. Now I'm going to do a quick switch here, a very, very hard segue left now. Every time I speak to you, Dan, you've got a mask of Ricky Hatton there, and I'm looking at it right now. And obviously, we got the shock news yesterday of the passing of Ricky Hatton. Now here in the UK, I think it's hard pushed to. I don't think you'll find anyone ever in the boxing game right now that has a bad word to say about Ricky Hatton. You experienced him out in the US when he came over to fight Floyd and Manny Pacquiao. I just want to get your your thoughts on the passing of a legend, and that's the word I'm going to use, legend in Ricky Hatton.
That's fair. I mean, he was a legend, no doubt about it. I enjoyed every one of my interactions with Ricky Hatton. I covered 6 of his fights in America. As good of a guy to deal with as you could ask for. I said this before he died. Like, if every top fighter treated the media members the way that Ricky dealt with us, it would be a beautiful thing, because he was always a cool guy, and he knew he got criticized about this or that, and he just never really seemed to give a shit. He'd be like, they're doing their job, I'm doing mine, and he'd offer to buy you a beer pretty much. That was just the type of guy he is. So I was very privileged to cover those fights, to get to know Ricky. I went back and I was looking. I had just traded some DMs with him in July. Not that we kept in touch on a regular basis or anything, but when they had announced that he was going to come out of his retirement and do this middleweight fight in the UAE at the end of the year, I had messaged him about that and a couple of questions, and wished him the good luck training and the whole thing. And he wrote back, and we had a nice little back and forth. And that's the last time I was in touch with him. But Ricky was I'd never seen anything like that in terms of a guy that was so beloved by his fan base that would travel to the ends of the earth for him.
Mm.
And what I was appreciated about Hatton was the fact that he became this big global mega superstar in boxing, made crazy amounts of money, but never that didn't change him. I've covered a lot of fighters where you see them as younger fighters and they have a certain way about them, and then the entourage gets bigger, the paycheck gets bigger, the cocoon around them grows bigger, and they're kind of trapped in there, and they kind of lose their way a little bit. Ricky never did. Ricky was always, from the time I met Ricky Hatton on a Prince Nassim undercard when he was a young kid in like 1998, way before he was world champion, all the way to the biggest fights in the world against Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. He was just the same guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciate that. He didn't let the fame and the money and all the attention, it never really changed him. He was still just a regular type of guy that you could just want to go hang out with, or play darts with, or have a drink with, or whatever. I mean, he was always with a good sense of humor. When he was not in the fight, but there was, like, let's say, a British fighter that was coming to Vegas to fight, and Ricky would come over to hang out. Sometimes the promoter would say, we did this a couple of times through the years, set up like a lunch with a few of the writers to just sit down and talk to Ricky about his plans or his career or whatever, to see if you get like a decent story or a column. And he was always funny, joking around, pleasure to be with, sloppy on the back. Like, those were really good times. I mean, I miss those times. I mean, I can still picture, sitting in like the coffee shop with him at one of these lunches at like the Mandalay Bay before a big fight, and shooting the shit with him, and always with a good story to tell. And then when he got in the ring, I mean, he fought his rear end off. He was just a swarming, aggressive kind of guy, winging those body shots. And when he lost, it was dramatic, and when he won, it was often dramatic. And I even to this day, this has even nothing to do with the fact that Ricky passed. Like, it still comes up when you think about the atmospheres of fights. People always ask, like, what's the best atmosphere? And I always talk about, among the greatest that I've ever been in, the whole fight week was when he fought Floyd. And that was not because, nothing against Floyd, but that was really because of Ricky's fans. As the statistics go, the MGM Grand Garden Arena holds for boxing around 18,000 people. But from what everybody said, about 30,000 Brits came to the fight, or came to Vegas to do their thing that weekend. That the MGM at that time, the biggest hotel in the world, it runs out of beer. That's the urban legend. And the guys with the drums and the horns running around the whole week. There's only one Ricky Hatton, with the song. I mean, it's still like imprinted on my brain for the rest of my life, that damn song. But it's I was still awake when the fight was over. I was still writing in my room after Canelo and Crawford, and when I saw it come across my social media that he had passed, I didn't necessarily believe it at first because I didn't recognize the message I had saw. But then when I saw things, I started to like hunt around a little bit. I saw that there was a posting from Frank Warren, and there was some postings on there. There was one by Marco Antonio Barrera, who was very close to Ricky, and some stuff from like not Prince Nassim, from Amir Khan. I posted a message at that point, and then I looked and I saw the article that was in the Manchester newspaper. Obviously, that's Ricky's hometown paper. I was really bummed out. I mean, what can you say? I mean, 46 years old, obviously, a young man, beautiful, he's had a son, the daughters, a granddaughter. I mean, just felt terrible about that. I mean, he was such a good dude to deal with, and he was a tremendous fighter. I am happy that at least if he was going to pass, that he had been rightfully elected to the Hall of Fame. It took him a while to get there, about 12 years after he was eligible, or after his retirement. You didn't become eligible right off the bat. But the point was, he got inducted, and I know he was very proud to do that in 2024. So it's unfortunate he won't get a chance to go back to Canastota and hang with the new classes in years to come. But just a great ambassador for boxing. I mean, I don't know anybody in boxing at all that says bad about Ricky Hatton. And that's other fighters liked him, media liked him, the promoters liked him. I mean, if that's the legacy, that you were a two-time, two-division world champion, and you made a lot of money and were involved in some humongous mega fights, and you left the sport and nobody had anything bad to say about you, that's a pretty good legacy.
Yeah, I agree, man. Like, you're just talking about, he sold out the MGM Grand twice over for that fight with the
Yeah.
fans that he brought over. I don't think we'll ever see that again. And yeah, I met Ricky 100 times as well, loads of times, and he was always the nicest guy, making me laugh and stuff like that. So yeah, he's going to be sorely missed. And yeah, my thoughts and prayers are with his friends and family. And I'm sure you
Oh,
do the
absolutely,
same.
absolutely. You know,
Well,
right before we hopped on this Zoom, because I wanted to do this before, but you know, I just didn't have a chance because I was traveling all day Sunday after the fight. Was you know, I've known and been friendly with Art Palullo from Banner Promotions for 25 years, and when Ricky came to America, uh, he had fought here on a Frank Warren. Like I said, he fought on like the Prince Nassim card back in like the 90s. But when he was already a headline star and he had contract was up with Frank Warren, he signed with Banner Promotions and he signed a big fat contract with HBO. And so Artie had, you know, some fights with him, including when he won the welterweight title against Collazo. And like, as I said, I've been friendly with Artie for a long time. I called him this afternoon right before we got in a Zoom call, and we were sort of just thinking over old times, the good times. Because even all these years later, with Ricky retired and Artie not doing as many events or anything like that, he still maintained a friendship with Ricky, and he had just spoken to him not that long ago. So we were just sort of, you know, talking about, you know, our good times we had with Ricky during those years.
definitely. Like I say, he's going to be sorely, sorely missed. I mean, the game has lost an absolute legend. I mean, like you said it and I said it. Not one person on this planet has a bad word to say about Ricky. Not just boxing, but I think every sort of where he went in life. I
He
think.
respected his opponents. He
Mhm.
respected the press. He respected the game. Uh, that's what you want.
100%. Dan, as always, mate, I do appreciate everything you do. Every time I love your stuff, love the way you work. And like I say, every time if you want to support and help Dan, there's links to your Substack, your articles, your YouTube, and your podcast as well below this
I'll tell
video.
you, I wrote an extensive piece on Ricky that's now on my Substack. You know, it's a newsletter you can get in your email, but it also lives on a website. A lot of the material is behind the paywall because that's how I make a living. But the Ricky Hatton obituary is free and open for anybody to read. So I would hope that they might go to danrafael.substack.com and read the piece I wrote about Ricky.
Yeah, I'm going to go and do that, Dan. Listen, thank you so much. As always, always nice to speak to you, man. I love the way you analyze boxing, and I think the
Thank you.
fans do too. I don't know if you read the comment section on YouTube, but
Once in a while,
once in a while, yeah. But everyone
some
loves
good,
yours.
some bad.
It's not. Listen, I'll tell you what. It's probably 99% good. Dan, thank you so much, mate. I hope you have a great rest of your day here there in the US. And until next time, I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, Andrew. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.